You only get out the game what you put into it, Shelley. Mm-hmm. And I put everything into it I could, and still do, for the people and for the people that I was playing for and the people that I was manager for. I didn't cheat them out of anything. So I put all my heart and soul to the extent that my family suffered.
Do you regret that at all?
Oh, yeah, I regret it very much, yeah. Somebody said the football's a matter of life and death to you. I said, listen, it's more important than that.
Your relationship with football, what was that like before Hillsborough?
Much like a lot of us, it was as strong as it could be. Grew up in a football-mad family. Uncles vying for you to follow their team, but it was the Reds that got me. And it was everything to me. From a young kid, I remember the 77 FA Cup final, sort of crying at me nan and granddad's, and a couple of days later crying with sort of joy after Rome. And it just became everything in my life. I had to be every game that I could from the earliest points. Like a lot of us, travelling with friends, school friends, older brothers, and travelling around the country watching some of the greatest teams. So everything I did was geared towards the match. And when I was old enough to get a Saturday job, which, by the way, was outside Burton's in Church Street with a sign saying you get bags more buzz at Burton's, I got a bit of money together to go to the match myself. And, it was, and is now, again, everything.
So, obviously, that Hillsborough disaster it's a turning point for football, not just a single individual as well. How's football after that moment for you?
Immediately afterwards, I stopped going for around about 11 years. And
wow.
So, from being someone who couldn't live without it, I couldn't stand to be there. I went to the Arsenal game, the most publicised Michael Thomas game, and I felt physically sick. I couldn't be on the cop. I couldn't be with people around me. And I had to make a change. I knew that. And so I tried to sort of just watch it from a distance. And when I went back, it just happens out the blue. I think someone offered me a ticket for, I think it was a Leeds game at Anfield. Must have been 2000, something like that. And I went back. I couldn't believe the changes in the place. How it felt like the demographic of people that when the game had stopped or changed. And I couldn't believe the change in the derby. That was the thing that struck me the most. I was looking at people having arguments over the derby, and I thought, look, we've never been like the best of friends, but it was never like this. So the change in it was huge, and obviously the commercialisation affected the prices, and that was the big thing for me. It was actually getting back into the swing of it, and getting back to being a regular match goer.
Did it take a while to enjoy that game again?
It did, yeah. It didn't feel like not that I belonged, but that I was comfortable there for a long time. I'd have like coping mechanisms that I'd have to be in early. I couldn't be in late and have a couple of late bevies and then getting in. And I had to wait until everyone went. I had to sort of be there close to the end of an aisle, and loads of things were going on for me, and that just started to become my norm.
And during the 80s, I mean, my dissertation was on the way the media portrayed Liverpudlians in the wider area of the Northwest in general, and Merseyside, I mean. The 70s and 80s were quite difficult for Scousers. Liverpool were winning everything up and down the country, and so were Everton were winning a few things as well. But they became the butt of the jokes, and even in like many sketch shows on like Saturday night television, you're looking at Harry Enfield and the like. Were you comfortable with those perceptions of Liverpudlians or Scousers before Hillsborough?
I never really saw the bad sides of it because, much like all, I used to enjoy watching Bread, and, you could sort of identify with people that you knew yourself, and it was light-hearted. It just felt that post Heysel, post Hillsborough, people's perceptions of Liverpool became sort of entrenched from those sort of caricatures. You know, you couldn't go anywhere without going, oh, you're not going to have me out capside, or I can't give you that to all because you'll probably nick it. And you'd start off by having a little like joke and think, you know, but you'd see that a lot of people actually believed it, you know, and it just, I think the more it went on, the more people now think that that's still true.
Yeah, and it's amazing. I mean, we're not from Liverpool, we're from the Wirral, which is only 3 miles away, but our accents are similar. So when we go away, or when we go to even just to Manchester, you know, you're getting called all sorts, or anywhere in the country you get, you know, and it is light-hearted banter at times, but there are people, like you say, who do believe it.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to deal with because, you know, you can't really get a word in edgeways sometimes. And trying to change someone's perception of you as a person is difficult. And I'm sure, you know, you've dealt with that. You know, you live in London at the moment. So I imagine that must have been quite hard.
Yeah, it was sort of like a double down situation, really, because, you know, you'd have it going on, but I suppose if you lived at home, you wouldn't feel that bad about it. You'd think, oh, well, you know, doesn't really matter. But down here, you know, you'd come across people every day and their immediate perceptions would be, you start speaking and they sort of take a step back. I have to say, more and more recently down here, I've found that it's become not acceptable, but people enjoy Liverpool and the Scouse accents, and there's a lot of sort of change in how people view the city. You know, when I left, as we all know, in the 80s, very, very different place, and now it's become like a huge tourist trap. And you hear people, and I get people saying, I'd love to go to Liverpool. I'd love to see what it's like. So it is starting to change, but down here at the start in the 90s, yeah, it was definitely Harry Enfield, calm down, and all that business.
Yeah, and that the 90s, for a lot of people seem to think that it was one article written by the Sun about Hillsborough, and it was actually, it carried on throughout. It was the rhetoric throughout most newspapers to sort of belittle Scousers. I was mentioning before to the lads about Jonathan Margolis after the Jamie Bulger murder, wrote about Self-Pity City. So what was that like? You know, you've gone from one horrendous disaster to another terrible tragedy, and people are sticking a boot in the media. That's got to be difficult.
Yeah, and it's like the trickle down effect, isn't it? It becomes almost well, for want of a better phrase, it becomes someone's truth. You know, they've heard something, they believe it, they pass it on, and you find yourselves in conversations. I would very often, and people would be telling me something, and I'd be going, "No, that's not what happened." I had a conversation with someone once about what happened in the tunnel at Hillsborough, and he was telling me that everyone died in the tunnel. I went, no, they didn't. Well, that's what I've heard. I said, well, I was there, mate, you know. And you'd have them saying, well, that's not, you know. So, yeah, the whole culture and the media as a whole turned and had that ability to do so because they were empowered to do it by what the mass media did.
And it's amazing, isn't it? Because I don't think a lot of people remember Mackenzie being the one who's in charge of his son and gave the right to go ahead with that article. Do you remember the guy who did the article?
No.
No? Right. No. So his name was Harry Arnold, and he was given an MBE, which for services to journalism. He's passed away recently. But he also worked for the Mirror as well, which is, I find, amazing. Jonathan Margolis used to work for the Times, also worked for the Mirror as well, which again is something I find amazing. To try and change and go from saying one thing to saying something completely different is quite astounding, really.
Yeah.
And back in 2008, Margolis actually did an article saying "Liverpool, I love you," which was a kind of an apology. I don't know whether you saw it. But it was kind of an apology to the city of Liverpool, but it came about around the time of the European Capital of Culture.
Yeah.
And I think that was kind of a watershed moment for the city and the surrounding areas. Did you notice a change in the way Liverpool was viewed after that moment, after that award?
Yeah, very much so. You know, not looked upon as sort of the rundown Liverpool of the 80s, you know, the place that no one wanted to go and with no-go areas. It turned into somewhere that was what I think the city's always been. It's aspirational. It's a restless city, but it's got so much culture in it. It's got so much creativity that I think people are starting to recognise what Liverpool truly is now. Um, and as for the apologies, I don't think there is an apology out there that can cover 31 years of lies and what it did to so many thousands of us. I don't think there's an apology that can cover that.
Kevin, in your own words, could you tell us about that day?
I've been going to aways for a while. Went with my mate from school or his brother, and I would go to every game that I could. And I was a season ticket holder on the Cop, and so I'd been to Hillsborough the year before, and we were in Pentry, because it was the cheapest, wasn't it? The terrace ticket and what have you. And the year before, I was just to the right of the goalpost. So when Aldridge scored the second goal, practically a couple of feet away, celebrating with us. And I loved that. I loved to be close to the players. Anyone that knows me will tell you I'm still a proper Liverpool anorak. And I was then, and I always probably will be. And the year of the disaster, we got there not really late, but later than we had done because of the traffic problems on Snake Pass. And I was 17, and contrary to what my mates would say, I didn't have a train. It wasn't my thing. We were all just wanting to get in. And we got there, walked down, and noticed the real difference was that the year before there'd been cordons, and it was like they were stopping you. Where's your ticket? Where you going? That sort of stuff, which I never really had a problem with because, at the end of the day, you were getting in and that was it. But the year of Hillsborough, it was almost like they'd abandoned their posts and they weren't there. And we were just given free rein to walk up to these, minimal amounts of turnstiles for how many thousands of us that were going into that ground. And it was only because I'd been there the year before that I was sort of, quite all right with where I was going. But I never knew there was another entrance into them central pens with the ones to the left and right. I'd never really looked, and it was never really something I thought about. And I went straight down that tunnel that day with me mate from school. We'd seen some other mates outside who we were at school with, and it was just it was weird because you couldn't stand and talk because we had the little thing where we have a little nat who's going to be playing, blah, blah, blah. See you out here later. And we couldn't even do that because everyone was going towards these turnstiles, and you could tell it was different. There was no disorder. There was just no organisation. And there was people getting panicked by the fact that they were in this mass scrum to get in. And the lad that I went with got turned around in the crowd and his jacket came off. We managed to pull it back. And we got in the ground. And we must have been in the ground about 2:10, something like that. So not really late, but quite late for us because I always wanted to be there to see them warm up and all that business. And the year before, as I said, I'd been down bottom right and there was no chance we were getting there. It was like shocker before you could even decide where you wanted to go. And we walked down past the middle sort of fencing between 3 and 4, the 2 pens. And it was a question of we're not getting much further in it because there's nowhere to go. And we were sort of up towards the back on the right-hand side, just close to the middle fence. And it was a lovely day. That's the thing that strikes me the most. It was the most beautiful day. Even this week, the weather, I just keep saying it's a perfect day for football. And in my mind, that's the best weather for football, sort of Easter time and the sun's out and it's warm. And it just started to get more and more chocker and you couldn't move. I mean, we're all in a football crowd trying to look like we can cope and we're all right. And even at 17, I haven't got a 17-year-old now, you feel like you're invincible, don't you? So you're never going to show weakness. You're not going to say, I don't like this. but I'm sure lots of people were thinking the same, because the heat was coming down and I couldn't move, and it filled up around me, and I kept thinking, oh, they'll stop it soon, there'll be no one coming in, but they let it carry on. And I thought to myself, I just wanted, I want to move my hands up, just to sort of move around a bit and get a bit of air, and I couldn't. I couldn't move my hands. I couldn't get my hands in my pockets. I couldn't do anything. And it was getting warmer and warmer, and I could feel the sweat trickling down the back of my neck, and I just felt uncomfortable, and I started to feel a bit sort of like woozy, sort of like hot, and my mate had moved off to the right. I mean, the surges on the terraces were moving up and down, and he'd gone off to the right. And just over everything, I started to hear just people moaning. Not like, oh, moaning, but moaning, as in like uncomfortable moaning. Grown men. People stopped talking. You could see people going pale and sweaty, and they couldn't have a conversation with you. They were just, everyone seemed to be in the middle of this nightmare. And it was almost like it was happening to you, but there was no one to take you out of it. And it started to get more hot, and I started to feel more faint. But eventually the team came out, and I thought, I'll be all right now, because everyone will sort of move around, and the game's going to start, so, it'll be all right. And it struck me that I couldn't get my hands above my head to clap them out. I couldn't move my arms. We always had this thing where we stood with sort of a crash barrier, either just behind us or close to it, so you knew you weren't going to get buffeted everywhere. And even with that, it was like being, and there's a bit of a pop reference for all the young kids, it's like being in a phone box with about 30 people, and no one's moving, and you can't move, and you start to panic. Everything inside of you tells you that this isn't the norm. And the game started, and it was almost like it was happening, but somewhere else. And I just remember looking around at the clouds and just thinking, how can this be going on? It was like an out-of-body experience. And the last thing I remember of the game, I'm sure for a lot of people, is Peter Beardsley at the bar at their end. And that was it. And obviously, the crowd noise of that happening, whoever was still waiting to come into the pens, not knowing what was going on or what it was like in there, came into the pens without being shown to the side pens, which, by the way, before the game I'd looked at, and I was seeing people sunbathing and stretching out and thinking, what's going on in there? And we're all like this in here. And that was it, really, because when that happened, the sound that stayed with me for many years was the sound of one of the crash barriers buckling, because it went under the strain of people. And everyone went down like in a tap dance forward. And I'm going down, and I'm just under the people, and I don't know where I am, don't know how long I was under there, and I sort of get myself together and pull myself up, and I'm down near the front left of the pen, which is where obviously the worst had happened to the poor people at the front, which would have been me the year before, and I had this moment with a guy next to me with like long dark hair and was all sweaty. And the panic in his eyes must have been matched by my own. And there was screaming and there was crying and sounds that you don't associate with a football game. And I saw him and he looked at me. And it was one of those situations where we both thought, got to get out of this. And the only way to get out of it, because you couldn't free your arms really, and you couldn't run or do anything, was to try and leverage yourself on someone to get out, which, believe you me, has taken me 31 years to be able to say. And only recently have I been able to sort of reprocess this and talk about it. And I sort of used his body to get me out of that situation, to sort of leverage up on him and get out. And there was a lad just straddling the two fences. And he had his hand down. He was just shouting, take me hand, take me hand. And I had to sort of get up on him. And then I had to stand on the people at the front, who we all know now, but you don't really like to think about. And I took his hand and he pulled me up. And I managed to get on the central fence and the front fence and leveraged myself over, and I jumped down and looked back into, you know, the face of hell, really, isn't it? You know, it sounds really melodramatic, but I've never wished that on anyone, and certainly not a 17-year-old lad like myself at the time, because you've got any clue what you're going to do. I was on my own. My mate had gone. Don't know where he'd gone. And you're just there, aren't you? And you're in the big world on your own as a 17-year-old, and you've just seen people die in front of your eyes. And obviously pretty soon after that, the game stopped. No memory of the players. I mean, again, you know, Anarak me. And my mates laugh at me now because anything with a live bird or a player, I'm right there. But that day, it couldn't have been Kenny Dalglish rolling the ball at me, but it wouldn't have bothered me because I didn't see any of them. They just, it wasn't happening for me. They'd gone. And then that's when people started to come out, get lifted out, and didn't really know what to do, didn't know first aid or resource or anything like that. But people were getting put onto advertising hoardings, and I just thought, well, that could have been me. It could be anyone I know. It could be one of my mates' family. Got to do what you can. And just like on automatic pilot, grabbed hold of one of the stretchers and ran down the pitch with this lad. And got down towards the Forest End. And obviously, you know, we spoke earlier about Heysel and perceptions of Liverpool, and I can only assume they thought we were having a fight in the sun. And they started to, like, you know, having a go at us and spitting at us, and I just was in shock. I couldn't argue with anybody. I couldn't say, you don't know what's going on down there. I just was working on automatic pilot. And I went round the corner to the gym, which I understand is now the souvenir shop at Hillsborough, which is strange to think of. And I expected some sort of mass emergency response, like, you know, come here, lads, and put him there, and we're doing this over there. And there was no one. No one. It was just a pile of people, just like piled up like you'd see on a World War One battlefield. Just nothing being done for anybody. They were just being left. And it just shook me to my core. I thought, we're alone here, you know, we're being watched. No one's helping us. And I ran back up and grabbed onto another one. And I managed to do just that one more. And then something just broke in me. And I was not running, but sort of jogging back up to the centre circle. And I went off towards the stand opposite the one where the clock is. And I just collapsed on the floor and started crying. Just everything hit me all at once. And I don't know how long I was there either, until some South Yorkshire copper came and just kicked me. And I sort of looked up and he said, "Oh, checking you're alive, you scout bastard." And I just looked at him like that, and he said, "Give me your details." And, you know, I was a law-abiding lad. And he just went, "Yeah, okay." So I gave him all my details. I just milled around in there, and no one was doing anything. There was no, like, you know, come over here, are you in shock? And then eventually they just opened the gates to the side of the pens near that stand, and they just let you walk out. And out we walked into the middle of Sheffield, having just witnessed what we witnessed, and no one did anything for us. Got back on a coach, people missing. Don't know if they're dead or not, don't know if they're just missing. No, my mate wasn't there. No money in my pockets because everything that happened jumping around. Obviously no mobiles. And just waiting to try and give a ring to me mum and dad just to say, look, I'm all right. And by the time we stopped at the service station, I don't even know where that was. One, I had no money. And two, the queue was just, and I just thought, look, I'll just get home. And I got off the coach and walked to my mum and dad, and my whole family were there just crying because they didn't know if I was alive or I was dead. And I didn't know what to say to anyone. I thought, I've just been to the sort of, you know, to hell. Even though I know that they wouldn't, I kept thinking, well, what do you think about me now? You know, do you think I did something wrong? And I just got hugged by everyone. And back in the 80s, you know, most of my family smoked. They don't now, but, you know, the place was filled like a boozer and everything. And I went upstairs to bed. And it never really hit me till the next day. And I was just on the landing, and there was something on the telly showing someone at the cathedral with a choir singing. And it just came out to me in just buckets of tears. And my mum said to me, Dad, you better go and get hold of him. And yeah, and that was it.